my daughter screamed. "Get out of my life." And every word was like a rusty dagger twisting through my 65 years of absolute devotion. She was standing in the living room of our little house in Harmony Creek, Ohio, surrounded by printouts from the Knott and Kleinfelds, scattered on the floor like wilted petals. Ashley pointed at me with a finger trembling, with a rage that seemed too big for her small frame. Kevin, her fiancé, just smiled from the couch. It was a look of pure satisfaction, the kind I now understand belongs to someone who already believes he owns everything that was ever mine. "You just don't get it, Mom. You're always in the way." Her screams bounced off the walls I'd painted myself 20 years ago. In this house I built brick by brick, or rather paycheck by paycheck, working double shifts at the old auto parts factory down by the river. The afternoon had grown heavy, the air thick and sticky like bitter honey, and I stood there in silence as she continued to spew her venom. The words flew out of her mouth like buckshot, aimed straight at my heart. But something strange happened in that moment. I stopped bleeding inside. A cold, almost surgical calm began to settle in my chest. I didn't cry. I just clenched my car keys, till the little teeth dug into my palm, feeling the warm metal against my skin while Kevin nodded in approval at every insult my own daughter threw at me. "Your mother is so dramatic," he whispered to Ashley, but I heard every single word. His eyes gleamed with a greed I should have recognized months ago when he started showing up at the house more often, measuring spaces with his gaze and a skin, about documents that were none of his damn business. The next day, real early, when the dew still beaded on my bedroom windows and the town was just waking up with the first sounds of the early shift heading to the plant, I put on my best navy blue coat and walked to the bank downtown. My steps were firm on the damp pavement. Each one was a decision I was making for the first time in decades just for myself. The morning air had that crisp Ohio freshness that clears your lungs and your mind. And for the first time in months I felt like I could take a full deep breath. The bank teller, a young girl named Brenda, looked at me strangely when I asked her to block all the supplementary credit cards I had given Ashley over the years. Her fingers hesitated over the keyboard as she reviewed the list. The main Visa, the emergency one from the credit union, the one for online shopping on Amazon. All those little pieces of plastic I had given with a mother's love, and which I now understood had been golden chains tying me to silent exploitation. "Are you sure, Mrs. Thompson? There are several cards and some have pending purchases," she asked in a soft voice, leaning forward with that professional concern they use when they think you're making a mistake. "Completely sure," I replied, and my voice sounded different, as if I had found a register I had lost long ago. The words came out with a firmness that surprised even me, as if they had been waiting years to be spoken with that kind of conviction. When I left the bank, the morning sun warmed my face in a way I hadn't remembered feeling in years. It was as if I had woken up from a very long dream where I was just a shadow paying bills and preparing meals for people who had forgotten to say thank you. Every ray of light seemed to penetrate layers of accumulated exhaustion, illuminating corners of my soul I thought were lost forever. I went back home and sat in my favorite armchair by the window, the one that looks out onto the garden where I planted lilac bushes when Ashley was little, and still hugged me before bed. My phone started ringing insistently, my daughter's name flashing on the screen again and again like a desperate alarm. But for the first time in my life I didn't run to answer it. Each ring was like a distant echo of a life that no longer belonged to me, a tune I had danced to for decades, but had finally decided to stop listening to. There was something profoundly liberating in that voluntary silence, in my disobedience to the expectations of others. The house felt different that morning, as if it had recovered its original soul, the one it had when it was just mine and not a stage for other people's dramas. 2 weeks before, when Ashley screamed at me in my own house, everything had seemed normal. She had arrived on a Saturday morning with a radiant smile, carrying bags from an expensive new bistro downtown, and a bouquet of roses that surely cost more than what I spent on groceries in a week. "Mom, I brought you your favorites," she said, kissing my cheek with a sweetness I now recognize as calculated. The roses were perfect, too perfect, as if they had been chosen not for love, but for the image they projected on Instagram. Kevin followed a few minutes later, carrying a bottle of some fancy Napa Valley Chardonnay, and that smile that had always seemed strange to me. It never reached his eyes. It just hung on his lips like a poorly fitted mask. "Miss Thompson, you look radiant," he said. And although his words sounded kind, there was something in his tone that made me feel like I was being evaluated, like a piece of furniture at an estate sale. I should have paid attention to how his eyes scanned my living room, ling Aaron on the oak mantelpiece where I keep the family photos, and on the solid cherrywood sideboard I inherited from my mother. "We have wonderful news," Ashley announced, tucking my hands in hers. Her fingers were cold despite the morning warmth, and she wore a new ring that sparkled with an ostentation that made me blink. "Kevin officially proposed to me. Mom, we want a wedding like the one I always dreamed of, like the one you never got to have." That last phrase stuck in my chest like a splinter. It was true, my wedding had been simple, almost austere. A small ceremony at the community church followed by a potluck in the backyard. But it had been beautiful because it was filled with genuine love. Now I wonder if that comparison was intentional, if even then she was planting the seed of guilt she would later use to manipulate me. Kevin settled into my couch as if he owned it, stretching his arms over the back with a familiarity that made me uncomfortable. "Ashley has told me so much about you, about everything you've done for her. A mother like you deserves to see her daughter get married in style." His words sounded rehearsed, like a speech he had practiced in front of the mirror. Every compliment came wrapped in an implicit request. Every smile was a bill pilling up somewhere in my future. "We've been looking at reception venues," Ashley continued, pulling out her phone and showing me pictures of luxurious halls with crystal chandeliers and tables covered in linens that looked like they cost more than my monthly Social Security check. "This one is perfect, Mom. It can hold 200 people. It has a garden for photos and the menu." Her eyes sparkled as she described dishes with names I couldn't pronounce, wines I had only seen in magazines at the doctor's office. The number 200 hit me like a silent slap. I knew at most 20 people from her current circle of friends. "That must be very expensive," I murmured. But my words were lost in Ashley's manufactured enthusiasm as she kept swiping through photos as if she hadn't heard me. Kevin nodded at each picture, making comments about the quality of the service, the exclusivity of the place, the importance of making a good impression. "You only get married once, right?" he said, winking at me. "You have to do it right." It was then that I noticed Kevin had been observing my house with too much attention. His eyes lingered on the deed to the house I had left on the dining room table after reviewing some property tax papers. He casually walked over, pretending to admire the family photos, but I saw his fingers brush against the document. "What a beautiful house, Miss Thompson. It must be worth a fortune in today's market." "It's my home," I replied, and something in my tone must have alerted him because he quickly moved away, resuming his perfect son-in-law act. But I had seen that look, that silent appraisal of my assets. It was the same look I had seen at the bank when I applied for my mortgage years ago. The look that calculates numbers and possibilities, not the one that appreciates memories and feelings. Ashley approached me with that smile I now recognize as dangerous. "Mom, I need to ask you a favor." "Well, it's not really a favor. It's more of an investment in my happiness." Her words were carefully chosen, each one strategically placed to make me feel selfish if I refused. "We need help with the wedding expenses. You know, Kevin is just starting his business. And Her voice broke slightly as if she were holding back tears. "I just want you to be proud of me." The silence that followed was heavy, laden with unspoken expectations. Kevin watched me with that smile I now understand was predatory, and Ashley waited for my answer with her eyes glistening, with tears that seemed far too convenient. I should have said no right then. I should have trusted that inner voice screaming at me that something was wrong. But a mother's love, that blind, sacrificial love I had cultivated for 35 years, made me nod. "Of course, my love. I'll do whatever I can to give you the wedding of your dreams," I told them that morning, and the words left my mouth as if they were automatic, programmed by decades of giving everything for my daughter. I saw Kevin's eyes light up with a satisfaction that should have alarmed me, and Ashley hugged me with an effusiveness that I now understand was more relief than gratitude. "I knew I could count on you, Mom. You're the best mother in the world." It was the next day that things started to get strange. Ashley arrived with a folder full of quotes, invoices, and contracts that needed just a little signature. "It's to book everything quickly, Mom. The best places get taken fast," she explained, spreading the papers across my dining room table. The same table where I had helped her with her homework when she was a little girl. The numbers danced before my eyes like impossible figures. The venue, the caterer, the flowers, the photographer, the band. Each line item was a small fortune that added up to a mountain of expenses that would keep me up at night for years. Don't you think this is a bit excessive? I asked, pointing to the cost of the floral centerpieces, which was equivalent to 3 months of my pension. Ashley sighed with that feigned patience adults use when explaining something obvious to a child. Mom, it's my wedding. I'm only going to get married once in my life. Besides, you never had this. Don't you want me to be happy? Guilt settled in my chest like a hot stone. She was right. I never had a lavish wedding. My marriage had been a simple ceremony at the neighborhood church with a family lunch afterward, but it had been beautiful because it was filled with genuine love, not this calculated display they were presenting to me. Kevin started showing up more and more frequently, always with new wedding ideas that required more money. Miss Thompson, I found the best band in the state. They play at celebrity weddings, he would say, showing me videos on his phone of musicians who looked like they stepped out of a Hollywood movie. We just need a down payment to secure them. His hands moved with grand gestures as he spoke, as if he were selling me a dream. But I was starting to see the cracks in his performance. His shoes were expensive but scuffed. His watch gleamed, but it was a cheap imitation, and he always had an excuse for not paying for any of the expenses himself. It was a Thursday afternoon when I discovered the first real lie. Ashley had left her purse open on my couch while she went to the bathroom, and her phone buzzed with a message. I didn't mean to read it, but the screen lit up right in front of my eyes, and I saw Kevin's name followed by words that sent a chill down my spine. It's all set. The old lady is paying for everything. After the wedding, we can pressure her about the house. My hand started to shake. I read the message over and over, hoping I had misunderstood. But the words remained there, immutable as a sentence. The old lady. That's what the man who was going to marry my daughter called me. The man who smiled and called me Miss Thompson with false respect. And the house, my house, the home I had built with so much effort, was part of their plans. When Ashley came back from the bathroom, I acted as if nothing had happened. I smiled, nodded at her new wedding ideas. I signed another check for the photographer, who absolutely had to be that one because his style was unique. But inside something had changed. It was as if I had woken up from a deep sleep and started seeing things with a painful clarity. Every smile from Kevin seemed more fake. Every hug from Ashley felt more calculated. Every new request for money sounded more rehearsed. I started paying attention to things I had previously ignored, like the way Kevin's eyes sized up my antique furniture, or how Ashley made comments about how cluttered my house was, suggesting that maybe I needed help getting organized. Mom, you don't have the energy you used to. Maybe you should consider moving into something smaller, more manageable, she told me one afternoon while pretending to help me clean the kitchen shelves. This house is perfect for me, I replied. But she insisted with that smile I now recognize as manipulative. But think about it, Mom. All this space just for you. You could sell it and have money to enjoy yourself, to travel. Her words trailed off when she saw my expression. For the first time in weeks, I didn't give in to her suggestions. I didn't smile compliantly. I just looked at her with a coldness that seemed to surprise her. That night alone in my bed, I reviewed all the checks I had signed in recent weeks. The sum was terrifying. It represented years of savings, sacrifices of meals, clothes not bought, trips not taken. All that money I had saved for my old age, for emergencies, for a little security, was evaporating into a wedding that was beginning to look more like a scam than a celebration. It was then that I truly began to see what was happening. It wasn't just an expensive wedding. It was a carefully orchestrated plan to empty my accounts and eventually take my house. And I, like a fool in love with the idea of being the perfect mother, had been financing my own destruction. The escalation began the following week when Kevin arrived at my house with a new folder, and that smile I had learned to fear. Miss Thompson, I have incredible news, he announced, settling into my couch as if he owned it. The reception venue had a last-minute cancellation, and they can give us a better date, but we need to confirm today. His eyes shone with a fabricated urgency as he spread out contracts that required my immediate signature. Ashley appeared behind him, radiant and nervous at the same time. Mom, it's perfect. It's a Saturday instead of a Friday, so many more people will be able to come. But the cost. Her voice trailed off as she pointed to a figure that made me dizzy. It was double what we had already spent, an amount that represented practically my entire life savings. We just need you to sign here and here, Kevin said, pointing to lines marked with little X's. And we can have the wedding of our dreams. Can't you wait a little? I need to review my finances, I murmured. But Kevin shook his head with that expression of false concern he had perfected. Unfortunately not, Miss Thompson. Another client is waiting for our answer. If we don't sign today, we lose the opportunity forever. Ashley came closer and took my hands, her eyes filling with tears that seemed far too timely. Please, Mom. You know how important this is to me. After everything I've been through, after all my failures, this is my chance to be happy. I signed. God forgive me, but I signed those papers that mortgaged my future because I couldn't bear to see my daughter cry. Or what I thought were genuine tears. Because now I understand that Ashley had learned to use my feelings as weapons against me. The moment the ink dried on my signature, I saw Kevin exchange a triumphant look with Ashley, a silent communication that completely excluded me. 2 days later, Kevin started showing up at my house unannounced. I was just in the neighborhood, he'd say, but he always ended up staying the whole afternoon, making business calls from my living room, using my Wi-Fi, eating from my refrigerator. I hope you don't mind, Miss Thompson. Ashley told me you love the company. But I had never said that. In fact, I was beginning to value my moments of solitude more and more, especially when he wasn't there evaluating my belongings with that calculating gaze. You know, Miss Thompson, he said to me one afternoon while checking his phone on my couch, Ashley and I have been thinking about the future. After the wedding, we'll need a bigger place to start our family. His words sounded casual, but there was something premeditated in the way he said them, as if he had been rehearsing this moment. This house is perfect for a young family. It has a lot of space, a good neighborhood, and it's in excellent condition. It's my home, I replied. But he continued as if he hadn't heard me. Of course. But think about it. You all alone in this big house. It must be a lot of work to maintain. You must feel very lonely sometimes. I didn't feel lonely until he started showing up, constantly filling my space with his invasive presence and unsolicited plans. We could make an arrangement that benefits everyone. You could move into a comfortable apartment easier to maintain, and we could stay here taking care of the place. The following week, Ashley came with a proposal that left me speechless. Mom, Kevin and I have been reviewing our finances, and I think it would be a good idea for you to add me as a co-owner on your bank accounts. Just in case, for emergencies. Her voice sounded sweet, but there was an underlying insistence that made me feel like I was being lulled into a trap. At your age, it's important to have someone who can help you with these things. At my age? I'm 65, not 90, I replied more harshly than I had intended. I manage my own affairs perfectly fine. But she insisted with that smile I now recognize as manipulative. Of course you do, Mom. But think of it as a precaution. And besides, it would be easier for the wedding expenses. You wouldn't have to keep signing checks constantly. Kevin nodded from his permanent position on my couch. It's very common, Miss Thompson. My mother did the same thing with me. It's just a formality, a way to simplify things. But I remembered his mother, a woman who had lost control of her finances when he moved into her house, and who now lived practically as a guest in her own home. It was that night I found Kevin in my kitchen going through the papers I kept in the important documents drawer. Excuse me, Miss Thompson, he said when he saw me. I was looking for a glass of water and the drawer opened by accident. But I had seen how he was photographing my documents with his phone, how he was reviewing my deeds and my bank statements with the meticulousness of someone taking an inventory. What are you really doing? I asked. And for the first time since I'd known him, his mask slipped a little. Just trying to understand the overall financial situation, so I can better help with the wedding expenses, he replied. But he no longer sounded convincing. His smile had become forced, and his eyes had that hardness I now recognize as the true personality behind the act. The next day, Ashley arrived with the news that they had found the perfect dress at an exclusive boutique. It costs a little more than we had planned, she admitted. But Mom, when I put it on, even the sales lady cried. It's like it was made for me. The price of the dress was obscene, equivalent to 6 months of my pension. But she had already put it on hold and just needed me to go pay the deposit. Ashley, this is getting out of control, I finally said, and her expression changed from sweet to dangerous in seconds. Out of control? Mom, it's my wedding, the only one I'm ever going to have. Are you telling me I'm not worth it? Her words were like daggers wrapped in reproaches, each one designed to make me feel like the worst mother in the world. And it worked because despite everything, despite the alarm bells screaming in my head, I went to the boutique and paid for that dress that cost more than my car. That night, after paying for the dress, I came home feeling like I had crossed an invisible line from which I could not return. I sat on my bed, surrounded by bills and receipts from a wedding that seemed to have turned into a monster devouring my future. And I made a decision that would change everything. I took out my phone and dialed the number of my lawyer, the same one who had handled the purchase of my house 20 years ago. Mr. Henderson, it's Martha Thompson. I need to see you urgently, I said, surprising myself with the firmness in my voice. It's about my documents, my properties. I think I need to protect my assets. There was a pause on the other end of the line, and then his professional yet warm voice reassured me. Of course, Mrs. Thompson. Can you come in tomorrow morning and bring all the documents you have, especially anything you've signed recently? The next day, while Ashley and Kevin thought I was at the market buying groceries, I headed to Mr. Henderson's office. The building was old but solid, like my lawyer, and his office smelled of legal paper and strong coffee. Tell me what's going on, he said. And for the first time in weeks, someone listened to me without judging me, without trying to convince me of anything, without a hidden agenda behind their words. I told him everything. The excessive wedding expenses, Kevin's constant visits, his comments about my house, the pressure for Ashley to become a co-owner of my accounts. I took out all the contracts I had signed, all the checks I had written, and spread them on his desk as evidence of my own naivety. Mrs. Thompson, he said, after carefully reviewing everything, you are a victim of what we call familial financial abuse. It's more common than you think. But what can I do? She's my daughter, I said, and the words came out laden with all the guilt and pain I had been accumulating. A mother's love doesn't mean you have to destroy yourself financially, he replied with a gentleness that made me cry for the first time in weeks. We are going to protect your assets. We are going to ensure that no one can make financial decisions in your name without your explicit consent. That afternoon, as I walked back home, I felt different. It was as if I had found an invisible armor that protected me from manipulation. I had a plan now, documents to back up my decisions, and more importantly, I had the certainty that I wasn't crazy, that my instincts had been right all along. When I got home, I found Kevin and Ashley in my living room, surrounded by more catalogs and contracts. Mom, good you're here, Ashley said with that smile I could now see for what it really was. A tool of manipulation. Kevin found the perfect florist, but we need to make the deposit today. Her eyes shone with that fabricated urgency I knew so well. How much? I asked, keeping my voice neutral. Only $15,000, Kevin replied as if it were an insignificant amount. It's for all the flowers for the ceremony and the reception. Believe me, Miss Thompson, it's going to be spectacular. Your daughter will look like a princess. But I was no longer listening to his empty promises. I was calculating that those $15,000 represented almost a year of my pension. I need to think about it, I told them, and I saw them exchange an alarmed look. Think about it? Ashley repeated, and her voice had lost all its sweetness. Mom, we've already talked about this. It's my wedding. You can't change your mind now. But for the first time in months, I wasn't intimidated by her tone. I can change my mind whenever I want. It's my money. Kevin stood up from the couch with an expression that no longer tried to hide his irritation. Martha, I think you're being a little selfish. Ashley is your only daughter. Don't you want to see her happy? His words were the same as always, but now they sounded hollow, like a broken record that had lost its power of persuasion. I want to see my daughter happy, I replied, but not at the cost of my financial security. Your financial security? Ashley jumped to her feet, and for the first time, I saw genuine anger in her eyes, not the calculated tears from before. Mom, you have this house. You have savings. You have your pension. What more do you need at your age? I'm startin' my life. I have the right to have something beautiful for once. And I have the right not to be left in poverty to finance your spectacle, I replied. And the words came out with a force that surprised me. The silence that followed was tense, filled with all the things we had been avoiding saying. Kevin's fists were clenched, and Ashley looked at me as if I were a stranger. Okay, Kevin finally said in a dangerously calm voice. I understand you need time to think about it. But Miss Thompson, I hope you understand that some commitments are already made. Some contracts are already signed. You can't back out without consequences. His words sounded like a barely veiled threat. Are you threatening me in my own house? I asked, and his mask slipped completely. It's not a threat, Miss Thompson. It's reality. You have signed contracts. You have made commitments. You can't just decide you don't want to honor them anymore. Ashley nodded, and I saw a hardness in her face I had never seen before, as if she were finally showing her true personality. That night after they left, I stayed up reviewing all the papers Mr. Henderson had given me. I had options. I had rights. And more importantly, I had the determination to use them. For the first time in weeks, I didn't feel like a victim. I felt like a 65-year-old woman who had worked her whole life, raised a daughter, built a home, and was not going to let anyone strip her of all that without a fight. The next morning, as the sun barely peeked through my bedroom curtains, I began to execute my plan with the silent precision of someone who has made a definitive decision. It was Saturday, and I knew Kevin and Ashley would sleep in late, which gave me time to do what I needed without interruptions. I put on my best navy blue suit, the one I reserved for important occasions, because I sensed this day would mark a before and after in my life. My first stop was the bank. The same teller who had blocked the credit cards greeted me with a professional smile. Good morning, Mrs. Thompson. How can I help you today? I explained that I needed to review all the movements in my accounts for the last 3 months and get certified copies of each transaction. I also need to change all my access codes and establish that no one but me can make transactions on my accounts, I said, sliding over the documents Mr. Henderson had prepared for me. While I waited for the statements, I checked my phone and found 12 missed calls from Ashley and 5 messages from Kevin. Mom, where are you? We need to talk urgently about the flowers. Miss Thompson, the florist is waiting for an answer. We can't waste any more time. But for the first time in months, I didn't feel that fabricated urgency they were trying to convey. Their emergencies were no longer my emergencies. On the way home, I stopped at an electronics store and bought a small digital recorder. The young, friendly salesman explained how to use it. It's very easy, ma'am. Just press this button and it records everything. The battery lasts for hours and the sound quality is excellent. I paid him in cash and put the device in my purse, feeling as if I had just bought a secret weapon. When I got home, Kevin and Ashley were already waiting for me in my living room. They had used the key I had given my daughter years ago when I still believed it was for genuine emergencies. Now I understood that key had been just another form of access they had been exploiting. Mom, where were you? We've been waiting all morning, Ashley said with poorly concealed impatience. I was taking care of some personal business, I replied discreetly, activating the recorder as I sat in my favorite chair. Business that should include us. Kevin intervened with that authority he had been gradually assuming in my house. We're family, Miss Thompson. You shouldn't make important decisions without consulting us. His words revealed just how far they had gone in invading my autonomy. Kevin, you are not my family yet. And when you are, you still won't have the right to an opinion on my finances, I said with a calm that seemed to disconcert him. Ashley quickly stepped in, as if they had rehearsed this conversation. Mom, you've been acting very strangely lately. We're worried about you. Maybe you should see a doctor, check your mental state. The suggestion hit me like a cold slap. They were trying to sow doubts about my mental capacity, likely preparing the ground for a possible legal incapacitation. My mental state is perfectly clear, I replied. So clear that I have decided to cancel my financial participation in this wedding. The silence that followed was so thick you could cut it with a knife. What does that mean exactly? Kevin asked, his voice having lost all pretense of cordiality. It means I'm not paying another dollar towards the expenses of this wedding. You can continue with your plans, but you'll have to finance them yourselves. Ashley turned pale, and I saw the entire facade they had built for months crumble. You can't do that, Ashley screamed, jumping up. You already signed contracts. You already committed. You're going to make us look bad with all the vendors. But I had expected this reaction and had my answer ready. I signed those contracts based on incomplete information and under emotional pressure. My lawyer has assured me that I can cancel my participation. Kevin approached me with an expression that no longer tried to hide his anger. Miss Thompson, I think you're making a very serious mistake. There are legal commitments involved here. You could face serious consequences if you don't comply with what you signed. His words sounded like a direct threat. But I was no longer the scared woman from a week ago. Are you legally threatening me in my own house? I asked, making sure the recorder caught every word. It's not a threat, it's a fact. You signed contracts that bind all of us. His arrogance was astounding. He had gone from pretending to be a respectful son-in-law to acting as if he owned my life and my decisions. Ashley started to cry, but these tears were different from the manipulative ones before. These were tears of frustration and rage. Mom, how could you do this to me? After everything we've planned, after everything we've dreamed of, you're going to ruin my wedding. You're going to ruin my life. Her words were loaded with poison, each one designed to make me feel guilty. I'm not ruining your wedding, Ashley. I'm protecting my future, I replied. You can have the wedding you want, but not with my money. Kevin paced my living room like a caged animal, clearly furious that his plan was falling apart. This isn't over, he muttered under his breath. There are ways to make an elderly person meet their obligations, especially when they're showing signs of mental instability. His words confirmed my worst suspicions. They were not only after my money, but were prepared to question my mental capacity if I didn't cooperate. I think it's time for you to leave my house, I said, standing up from my chair with a dignity I hadn't felt in months. And Kevin, I want the keys back that Ashley gave you. I'm not giving anything back, he shouted, finally showing his true nature. This house is going to be ours anyway. An old woman living alone in such a large property is a waste. Sooner or later, you're going to need someone to take care of you, and you'd better get used to the idea that it's us. His words completely revealed the plan they had been executing from the beginning. Get out of my life. Ashley screamed at me with a voice I had never heard before. A voice filled with pure hatred that cut through me like a burning knife. Her eyes, which once looked at me with filial love, now gleamed with a malice that made me step back involuntarily. If you don't want to be part of my happiness, then don't be part of my life at all. Kevin nodded behind her like a sinister chorus. His lips curved into a smile of satisfaction. He no longer bothered to hide. Perfect, I replied, and my voice came out firmer than I expected. If that's what you really want, Ashley, you'll have it. I walked over to the table where I kept my important documents and took out an envelope I had prepared that morning, with the help of Mr. Henderson. Here is the formal cancellation of all the wedding contracts that bear my signature. From this moment on, you are fully responsible for all expenses. Kevin's expression changed from triumphant to alarmed in seconds. Wait, Miss Thompson, you can't do that. There are penalties. There are clauses. But I had already reviewed every contract with my lawyer, and knew exactly what my rights were. I can and I am. All contracts I signed under emotional duress have been legally voided. If you want to proceed with the wedding, you will have to assume all the costs yourselves. Ashley lunged for the envelope, trying to snatch it from me, but I had already put it in my purse. You can't do this to us. Everything is already paid for. Everything is already arranged. Her screams filled my living room, bouncing off the walls that had witnessed so many happy moments when she was little. Yes, I can, and I already have. Like you said, you want me out of your life. Well, I'm also getting out of your wedding. Kevin grabbed my arm with a force that surprised me. You're going to pay for this, Miss Thompson. We're going to sue you for breach of contract, for emotional damages, for everything we can. His mask had fallen completely, revealing the despicable man he had always been underneath the perfect son-in-law act. Let go of me immediately or I'm calling the police, I said, showing him my phone. Do it. Ashley screamed at me. Call the police. Tell them your own mother is sabotaging your wedding. Tell them the woman who gave you life is destroying your happiness. Her words were poison and daggers designed to cut me where it hurt most. But something strange had happened inside me. Those words that would have once torn me apart now bounced off me like raindrops on an umbrella. You have no power over me anymore, Ashley, I said with a calm that surprised even me. For 35 years, your happiness was my absolute priority. I sacrificed my dreams, my money, my time, everything for you. But not anymore. I will no longer finance your spectacle or your manipulation. The words left my mouth as if they had been waiting decades to be spoken. Kevin began to pace my living room like a caged predator. This isn't over, Miss Thompson. We have rights. Ashley is your only daughter, your only family. When you're old and sick, when you need care, who do you think will be there to help you? His words were a thinly veiled threat. Emotional blackmail taken to its extreme. I'd rather be alone than in bad company, I replied. And for the first time in months, I felt I was saying exactly what I thought. And if that's your idea of family, Kevin, then I want nothing to do with you. Ashley burst into tears again. But these tears were different. They were tears of rage, of frustration from someone watching something they thought they had secured slip away. You're selfish, she screamed at me. You've been selfish your whole life. You never gave me what I needed. You never gave me what I deserved. Her accusations were so absurd they almost made me laugh. I, who had worked double shifts to pay for her college, who had sold my jewelry to buy her a car, who had lived on the bare minimum so she could always have the best. You know what, Ashley, I said, getting up from my chair and walking to the door. You're right. I have been selfish. I've been selfish for letting you treat me like an ATM. I've been selfish for not teaching you the value of money and hard work. I've been selfish for not setting boundaries when I should have. I opened the door wide and pointed them out. You can't kick us out, Kevin shouted. But I had already taken out my phone and dialed 911. Police. I have 2 people in my house who refuse to leave after I've asked them to. Kevin turned pale when he heard my words and finally started walking towards the door. This isn't over, Ashley muttered as she passed me. You're going to regret this, Mom. You're going to regret it when you're all alone and no one remembers you. But her threats no longer affected me. It was as if I had developed an immunity to her poison after so many years of exposure. Maybe, I replied. But I'd rather regret protecting myself than regret letting you destroy me financially. Kevin stopped at the threshold and looked at me with an expression I will never forget. You don't know who you're messing with, Miss Thompson. This is just the beginning. On the contrary, I said, closing the door behind them. This is already over. I locked the deadbolt and stood in my entryway, listening to their angry voices fade down the street. For the first time in months, my house felt like my home again. The silence that followed was not empty, but filled with a peace I had forgotten existed. I walked to my favorite chair and sat down, looking out the window at the garden where I had planted lilac bushes when Ashley was little. The flowers had grown and bloomed without my constant attention, feeding on the rain and sun, finned in their own way to thrive. Maybe it was time for me to learn to do the same. The next day, the phone started ringing early. It was Sunday, a day I used to dedicate to preparing family lunches that I now understood had been more obligation than pleasure. Each ring was like a desperate echo of the life I had decided to leave behind. Ashley called me every 20 minutes, alternating between desperate pleas and veiled threats. Mom, please, we can fix this. You can't just end things with me like this, she said in one message. You're going to pay the consequences for what you did, she screamed in the next. But I no longer ran to answer the phone like a trained dog. I made my morning coffee with the calm of someone who has made a definitive decision, and sat in my garden to enjoy the morning sun. It was strange how the same sun that shone yesterday now felt different on my skin, warmer, more welcome, as if I had regained the right to enjoy the simple things in life. At 10 o'clock in the morning, an unfamiliar car pulled up in front of my house. Kevin and an older man I didn't recognize got out, dressed in suits that tried to project authority. They walked straight to my door and knocked with an insistence that bordered on aggression. Mrs. Thompson, we are legal representatives of the Morales Garcia family. We need to speak with you about the contractual commitments you have violated. I have no commitments to the Garcia family, I replied from behind the locked door. And if you want to talk about legal matters, you can contact my lawyer. I gave them Mr. Henderson's name and number and watched as Kevin furiously scribbled it on a piece of paper. Mrs. Thompson, this can be resolved amicably if you cooperate. There's no need to resort to legal proceedings that could be very costly for you. It was the same old blackmail but wrapped in legal terminology. My legal representatives are prepared for any action you wish to take, I said, feeling a confidence I hadn't experienced in months. Now, please leave my property or I will call the police for trespassing. I heard them muttering to each other before they walked away, but I could catch snippets of their conversation. Stubborn, mentally incompetent, other ways. That afternoon my granddaughter Savannah showed up at my door. Unlike her mother and Kevin, she knocked gently and waited for me to open it voluntarily. Her 16-year-old eyes were swollen from crying, but there was something different in her expression, a maturity I hadn't seen before. Grandma, can I come in? I need to talk to you. Her voice trembled, but not with manipulation, with genuine emotion. Of course, my love, I said, hugging her for the first time in weeks without feeling like I was being evaluated or judged. Savannah sat on the couch where Kevin had so often plotted my financial ruin, but her presence cleansed the space of all its previous toxicity. Grandma, I heard everything that happened yesterday. Mom and Kevin don't know I'm here. And what do you think about all this? I asked, preparing myself for another emotional attack, another person trying to make me feel guilty for protecting my future. But Savannah surprised me with her answer. I think you did the right thing, Grandma. I've been watching how they've been treating you for months, and it wasn't right. Kevin is a horrible man. And Mom is behaving like someone I don't recognize. Her words were like a balm to my wounded soul. Finally, someone in my family saw what had really been happening. Your mother is very angry with me, I said, tucking her hands in mine. This might separate us forever. Savannah shook her head, and her eyes shone with a determination that reminded me of myself at her age. Grandma, I'm not going to choose between you, but I'm also not going to pretend I don't see what's happening. Kevin is filling Mom's head with ideas about your money, your house, your future. I've heard their phone conversations when they think I'm asleep. Her revelations confirmed my worst suspicions, but they also filled me with pride for my granddaughter's integrity. What exactly have you heard? I asked, and Savannah took a deep breath before answering. They talk about realtors they've already contacted to appraise the house. Kevin has papers about retirement homes, places where he says you'd be more comfortable. They also mention something about your mental incapacity, about getting medical documents that say you can't manage your own affairs. The coldness of their plans hit me like ice water. It wasn't just greed. It was an elaborate conspiracy to control every aspect of my life. Savannah, this is very serious. Would you be willing to repeat this to my lawyer? She nodded without hesitation. I'll do whatever it takes to protect you, Grandma. You've always protected me. That night, after Savannah left, promising to come back soon, I stayed up planning my next move. It was no longer just a matter of protecting my money, but of protecting my freedom, my autonomy, my right to grow old with dignity in my own home. Kevin and Ashley had declared war, but they didn't know who they were messing with. I took out all the documents I had been collecting over the week, recordings of conversations, bank statements, canceled contracts, my granddaughter's testimony. It was a complete arsenal of evidence that demonstrated the pattern of abuse and manipulation I had been suffering. But more important was the proof that my mind was perfectly clear, that my decisions were rational and justified. For the first time in months, I fell asleep feeling completely in control of my life. I had taken the reins of my destiny, had drawn clear boundaries, and had found unexpected allies in my fight for dignity. Tomorrow would be another day of battle, but this time I had the right weapons. And more importantly, I had the iron-willed determination of a woman who had decided that enough was enough. 3 months later, I sat on the terrace of my new apartment, a bright place overlooking the park where children played and elderly couples walked hand in hand. I had sold the big house, the one Kevin had coveted so much, and had moved into a space that was completely mine, chosen by me, paid for with my money and designed for my comfort. Every piece of furniture, every curtain, Every potted plant had been a decision I made without consulting anyone, without asking permission, without justifying myself to others' expectations. The lawsuit Kevin had promised never came. My lawyer explained that after reviewing all the evidence we had collected, including the recordings and Savannah's testimony, any legal action against me would be not only fruitless, but potentially damaging to them. Mrs. Thompson, you have a solid case if you wanted to sue them for harassment and financial abuse, Mr. Henderson had told me. But I had decided I didn't want to invest any more energy in that toxicity. I just wanted peace. Savannah visited me every Sunday, and our relationship had become deeper and more genuine than ever. Without the pressure of family manipulations, we could talk about everything. Her college plans, her dreams, life in general. Grandma, do you have any regrets? About protecting myself? About reclaiming my dignity? Never, I answered. And I could see in her eyes that she understood perfectly what had happened. Mom is very bitter, Savannah told me. The wedding was canceled because they couldn't pay for all the commitments they had made. Kevin blames her. She blames me for visiting you and I. Her voice broke a little. I miss my mom, but I don't miss the toxic environment she had created with him. It was painful to hear about Ashley's suffering, but it was also confirmation that Kevin had never been the solution to my daughter's problems, but the cause of many new ones. Do you know what I've learned, Savannah? I said, caressing her young hands that so resembled mine at her age. I've learned that true love isn't shown by sacrificing yourself to the point of self-destruction. It's shown by setting healthy boundaries, teaching values, and preserving your own integrity, so you can give from a place of strength, not lack. My words resonated in the air like a lesson it had taken me 65 years to learn. One afternoon while watering the plants in my new container garden, I saw Ashley standing across the street. She looked thinner, paler, and there was something defeated in her posture that broke my heart. Our eyes met for a moment that felt eternal, filled with everything we had lost and everything we could have had. She raised her hand as if to wave, but then let it fall and walked away without a word. I didn't run after her. I didn't shout her name. I didn't open the door to beg her to talk. For the first time in her life, I let Ashley walk away without chasing her, without trying to fix what she had broken. I had learned that some doors can only be opened from the inside, and that my role as a mother was not to force reconciliations, but to be available if one day she decided to seek me out with genuine intentions. That night, Savannah called me crying. Grandma, Mom is doing really bad. Kevin left her when he realized there was no more money to be gotten from us. He left with all his things and left her with debts from the wedding that never happened. My heart squeezed hearing about my daughter's pain, but I also felt a strange sense of justice. Kevin had finally shown his true colors, just as I had predicted. Do you want me to go see her? I asked Savannah, knowing that any approach from me could be misinterpreted or rejected. I don't know, Grandma. She's very proud, very hurt. But I think deep down she knows you were right about him. My 16-year-old granddaughter's wisdom constantly impressed me. She had seen firsthand what manipulation could do to a family, and she had chosen the side of honesty. 6 months after I last saw Ashley on the street, I received a letter. Not a text message, not a call, but a handwritten letter on paper I recognized as the stationery I had given her years ago. Mom, it began. I know I have no right to write to you after everything that happened, but I need you to know that I understand now what Kevin really was. I also understand that my actions were unforgivable. The letter continued with apologies that sounded genuine, with acknowledgments of mistakes that seemed to come from a place of real pain, not manipulation. I'm not writing to ask for money or for you to rescue me from the consequences of my decisions. I'm writing because I want you to know that I admire you for standing up for yourself when I wasn't able to stand up for you. Tears streamed down my cheeks as I read words I had been waiting to hear for months. If you can ever forgive me, I would like to try to rebuild our relationship from scratch, as two adults who respect each other, not as a mother and daughter trapped in toxic patterns of the past. It was signed simply, Ashley, not your daughter, as she used to do, as if she understood that family titles had to be earned, not taken for granted. That afternoon, as the sun set on my new life, I planted a mint seedling in a new pot. Mint, the plant seller had explained, was resilient and constantly regenerated, even after being cut back. As I buried the small roots in the fresh soil, I thought about second chances, about forgiveness that comes from strength, not weakness, about the possibility of something beautiful growing in the place where there had once been so much pain. I didn't know if Ashley and I would ever be mother and daughter again in the traditional sense. But for the first time in years, I had hope that we could be something better. Two women who respected each other, loved each other from an appropriate distance, and had learned that true love sometimes requires painful but necessary boundaries. I closed my eyes and breathed in the scent of fresh mint, knowing that I had found my way back to myself.